Petr No Mercy Yan versus Cory the Sandman Sandhagen co-main event UFC 267 October 30th from Yas Island in Abu Dhabi. Hey everybody and welcome to the next pre-fight breakdown. Today we're going to be talking about the co-main event on the UFC 267 card. Now this fight comes to you from the bantamweight division, and between the two men, Petr Yan and Cory Sandhagen, they will be competing for an interim title, and the story of how we got here is actually a very interesting one. And it's kind of important for us to understand why we're standing at this juncture today and why these men are contesting for that interim strap. So what the story goes, Henry Cejudo, who was the bantamweight champion at one point, retired after his fight with Dominic Cruz. Obviously, they had a void to fill and they started putting contestants together. Eventually though, it was Petr Yan and Jose Aldo that contested for that vacant bantamweight title. Petr Yan came up on top when he absolutely massacred Jose Aldo, and in his first title defense, he faced Aljamain Sterling. Now, this became really interesting because Aljamain Sterling earned the title shot off of the back of his performance against Cory Sandhagen, a man he submitted in round one with some very impressive back game. I mean, he climbed onto Cory Sandhagen's back and persisted with submission attempts until he finally got that choke. But fast forward to the actual title fight, Aljamain Sterling was, well, honestly, for a lack of other words, was getting his behind handed to him by Petr Yan, who was so far ahead on those cards, there was no doubt that he was going to win. But unfortunately, Petr Yan made a mistake and so caught up in the fight, and hearing instructions from his corner, going kind of crazy with excitement, that he ended up kneeing Aljo in the face. Aljo had his knees on the ground. So he was a downed opponent. That was an extremely illegal knee. There was sort of nothing questionable about it. It was straight up illegal. And Peter kneed him in the head, which obviously ended in a DQ victory, crowning the first ever UFC champion by DQ. And obviously, because of the way it ended, left a bad flavor in everybody's mouth. We wanted to have the fight run back. The fans asked for it. Obviously, the UFC wanted it. So they scheduled the fight for UFC 267. Unfortunately though, even before Aljamain Sterling went into his fight with Petr Yan, he had persisting neck issues, spinal injuries, things of that nature that are common for a lot of fighters to encounter in their career. And well, of course, that knee in that fight did not help. Aljo went in for surgery right after. He's still in recovery. And the message came a few weeks back that he won't be ready in time for the UFC 267 card. Well, up steps Cory Sandhagen. Cory actually lost his last fight against a returning ex-champion in TJ Dillashaw, or as some folks call him these days, Cheetah Dillashaw, who came back and had a very, very impressive performance. Sandhagen and this man went toe-to-toe for 3 rounds, and honestly, that decision could have gone either way. I wouldn't have been surprised if they'd awarded that as a draw between the two men. Well, long story short, between all of these complications and TJ now being injured off of that performance against Cory, couldn't step up to the mantle. So it fell on Cory Sandhagen to replace Aljamain Sterling in the fight against Petr Yan. And of course, since Aljamain is the champion, these two men will now contest for the interim belt. Wow, that was a long-winded way of getting to how we landed at this matchup, but that's actually what the story is. Now let's take a look at our two contenders and see what they're bringing to the table. Well, first up, we have the Sandman, Cory Sandhagen. Now, Cory Sandhagen made a case for himself to get into title contention off of the back of some fantastic performances. If you look at his last 5 in the UFC, it looks like a bit of a mixed bag because he lost his last fight against TJ Dillashaw, and of course that submission loss to the current champion Aljo. If you put the TJ Dillashaw loss aside, because I don't really consider that a loss in the true sense, that fight could have gone either way, and Cory's stock actually went up after that fight. Let's focus on the others on that list. His performance against Frankie Edgar and Marlon Moraes in particular, I'd recommend you go and take a watch at what he was up to in those fights. The Marlon Moraes knockout, a spinning heel kick to the head of Marlon Moraes, which he followed up with shots on the ground to close the fight. Now, it's even more impressive because of who he did it against. So the fact that Cory landed such a elaborate attack, a spinning heel kick, and landed it squarely on Marlon's forehead, knocking him out, was an impressive feat. He then took on Frankie Edgar, and this one was even more impressive. I mean, he had Frankie going side to side, baited him, and then shot out a knee to the head, which is as good as any I have ever seen in my years of being a UFC fan. That knee came out like it was shot out of a cannon. And of course, it put Frankie Edgar to sleep. It wasn't a knockout, it was a KTFO. I'm sure you know what that means. So, Cory Sandhagen had some fantastic performances until the sort of setback against TJ Dillashaw when he dropped that split decision. No harm done, because here he is in title contention, going up against the man that everyone really believes is the current champion, Petr Yan, who unfortunately dropped his title in very, very unfortunate circumstances when he got carried away and hit Aljo with an extremely painful looking illegal knee to the head when Aljo was down. Well, let's take a look at what Petr Yan's come through and what his journey looks like so far and up to the title shot. So Petr Yan has a very impressive record. Fighting out of Russia, this man had only lost once before he showed up in the UFC. And that was early days, small promotion that he fought in back home. But since he's been in the UFC, barring the DQ loss to Aljo, this man is undefeated. And if you really want to see why they call him No Mercy Yan, you ought to go watch the fight that he took against Jose Aldo, the fight that actually brought him the Bantamweight Championship. And while I think that fight going the way it did was a little bit down to the referee not doing his job, I mean, Jose Aldo did not need to take the pounding that he did. It goes to show what a savage Petr Yan is. And then go ahead and watch his actual title fight versus Aljo, the one where he dropped the title. Except for that illegal knee, Aljo had nothing on this man. He was manhandling Aljo. He was imposing his will on the man. And it looked like these were fighters from two different skill sets, from two different classes altogether. When they say there's levels to this thing, I don't think I could think of a better example in recent history. So Petr Yan is going to be firing on all cylinders, and I can't think of a better opponent than Cory Sandhagen. So this is going to be one hell of an exciting fight. I wouldn't miss it for anything. So go check out the co-main event on UFC 267, and I'll see you in the next video where we're going to talk about the headliner, Blachowicz versus Teixeira. Please keep watching, like, subscribe, share, and follow. I'll see you in the next video.